Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. It's Science Fiction Saturday once more. And this time we're going for entertaining science fiction movies. Two movies which are thematically kind of the same. One from 1986, another one from 1998. But they're both about nuclear families in America being attacked by science fictional concepts. And the first one, which is Critters from 1986, in Critters, that science fiction concept is little round fur balls with enormous teeth that can shoot spikes out of their fur. And in the second one, 1998, Small Soldiers, it's rogue AIs embodied by plastic toys. Of course, one of the prototypes for this kind of movie is Gremlins from 1984. And a lot of movies follow that template because it was crazily successful. But Critters does it a little differently. It's a little more gritty, a little more granular, and a little more fun in some ways. Gremlins I didn't like because right at the end, most of the town has been decimated, and then the family sits down for a happy Christmas dinner. And by the way, I know that decimated means 1 in every 10, but we're going to use it in the contemporary sense. Critters I like because it's lower budget. It only cost about $2 million. Directed by Stephen Herrick. It's got a pretty good cast, with Dee Wallace in there as the mum, Billy Green Bush as the father. You had Terrence Mann in there playing an alien. You had Scott Grimes, who was a child actor who went on to, as an adult, be in things like The Orville with Seth MacFarlane much later on. We also get Billy Zane playing the mandatory boyfriend for the teenage sister. Doesn't end well for Billy Zane in this one, even though he does have a reasonable head of hair and a mullet. The movie starts out like a lot of 1980s science fiction movies. It's on a prison asteroid where a bunch of creatures called Krites escape from the prison, and 2 bounty hunters are sent after them. They're chameleon aliens. They got heads like luminous green silly putty, and they can change their appearance based on something that grabs their attention. In one case, it's a pop star that they see on television, and in the other case, it changes between different characters as the movie progresses. It's the usual kind of gear. The spaceship crashes on Earth, and the Krites escape and start rolling around and getting bigger as they eat things and reproducing. They're pretty nasty. They roll around like tumbleweeds as a means of propulsion, which is kind of convenient because it's very hard with puppets to animate them in such a way that they look like they're walking. So they avoided that by getting them to roll like tumbleweeds. They're kind of intelligent, but they're also voraciously hungry. They will eat anything with protein in it, and they shoot darts out of their fur, which poison whoever they touch. They're in a town called Grover's Bend, Kansas, which I don't know whether it exists or not. I didn't bother to look it up on Google Maps. I'll actually put up here whether it exists or not. And you got a country farm where the father, played by Billy Green Bush, and his wife, Dee Wallace, that stage was called Dee Wallace Stone. They've got a teenage daughter and a son played by Scott Grimes, who has a hobby of creating fireworks, which turns out to work out pretty well for the plot of the film. In fact, he ends up blowing up a spaceship with it. But it's not really the sort of thing you want to encourage your kid to do. They've also got a hand working on the farm, played by Don Opper, who was the really interesting main character in a movie called Android in the 1980s. And his character is an alcoholic because he got kidnapped by aliens previously. And he has a certain arc in there which isn't particularly well written, but it kind of works in context of the movie. The aliens lay siege to the farm and to the household. There's a lot of stuff where they try to shoot the aliens with shotguns, and in doing so, pretty much messing up their house big time. Shooting a shotgun in the house is probably not something you want to do if you ever want to hear anything again. These movies never make an allowance for that. I mean, I've shot a shotgun, and even when you do it outside, your ears are ringing for a little while unless you have ear protection. It's kind of like when people go into helicopters in movies. The only time I went on a helicopter ride in real life, it was a Black Hawk helicopter. And you have to wear ear protection if you go anywhere near it, because if you're sitting in the back of a Black Hawk, you've got an enormous jet engine 18 inches behind your head. You need to take care of your hearing. But movies don't take that into account. And it pisses me off every time I see it. The special effects in this were made by the Kyoto brothers, the same people who later on went on to create one of the great movies of this era, Killer Clowns from Outer Space. And the practical effects they use for the critters are pretty good. They do feel like strange little glowing red-eyed aliens. The teeth are really creepy and ugly. There's a scene where one of them swallows a firework. It doesn't react well to it. And they really had a lot of trouble getting things to work. They had to reshoot a number of things because just that puppetry and getting the special effects, which were all practical special effects, to work was a non-trivial task. They have all the usual settings you get for this kind of movie. You have the sheriff's office. Well, the sheriff's office is stacked with character actors. You got Ethan Phillips, who turned up in Star Trek Voyager. You got M. Emmett Walsh playing the sheriff. You've got Lin Shaye, who went on many decades later to be the Scream Queen horror movie star of the second and third decades of the 21st century. Lin Shaye has still got a great career. She's 80 now, but she's still featuring in a whole bunch of different horror movies. And she's one of those people whose career really took off after she turned 50. And for a female actor, that's almost unique. And I love the fact that we see an early Lin Shaye here.
Morning, Harv.
Morning, Sal. What's happening?
Well, this here says that John Travolta used to be a waitress in Fort Myers, Florida.
Yes, she did get her career start because her brother, Bob, was a producer and was in fact the producer of Critters. But it's good to see Lin Shaye at the start of her career, just seeing where she came from. Now she's one of the iconic horror film stars of the 21st century. So all credit to her for that. I just love this kind of science fiction horror film. Yes, there is that VHS era nostalgia, which I've talked about on the channel before. The other part of it is the practical special effects. Yes, there is some process work for the spaceships and things like that, but most of it is practical special effects. They blew up an entire house in this movie and then had to find a way to reassemble it. And that's done quite impressively. And there's one moment when one of the chameleon alien bounty hunters is morphing into a physical form. And they use some really good reverse filmed special effects to show the face of the alien changing again, changing into a human being. And I love that kind of stuff. It's an elaboration on, of course, the Ark of the Covenant scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark. But I think this one tops it. It's really icky and really strange and really alien. And it works incredibly well. Critters was an incredible success. In fact, there were 3 sequels to it and a reboot in 2019 as well, where they got Dee Wallace back into, I'm not sure whether she's reprising her previous role or whether she's playing a new character. But this movie franchise has legs. It did incredibly well, and the first one cost $2 million and made $13 million in 1986 money, which is pretty good, which of course is the reason they made the sequels. One of the things I like about it is it doesn't take on the cartoonish, over-the-top, layered with popular cultural reference approach the Gremlins did. It doesn't do things as cartoonishly and as child level. It's a little more gritty. And yet, things like the teenage daughter snogging in the hayloft with Billy Zane, and it's pretty obvious that they're going to get it on. That kind of stuff doesn't float in a 21st century movie, but it is part of that 1980s movie culture. And Scott Grimes' character is pretty good. There's a lot of him running around and dodging explosions and lighting off fireworks and using a slingshot to fight aliens. I like that kind of stuff in movies. I like kids doing kid stuff. And didn't we all do that stuff, really? We played with fireworks when we were kids. We did weird things. I mean, I can even remember in my 20s, my friend and I made napalm out of petrol and polystyrene packaging. And you can do that, and it ends up like silly putty, only it's napalm and it sticks to things and burns. A lot of that kind of stuff that people do when they're young is in this kind of movie, and I love that. I love the way there's an acknowledgement the kids are going to do transgressive things and it's weaponized to fight the baddies. That also happens in Small Soldiers. I miss having exploding fireworks. When they banned them, I was quite sad. So Critters gets a thumbs up from me. It's fun to revisit. In fact, I've got it on DVD. I don't have a Blu-ray or a 4K or anything like that, but I've got that one. And it's a good, honest little version of it. There is an alternative ending which is in here as an extra on the DVD, but I haven't bothered to access it. There's the back of it. This one came out from, I think it was Madman Entertainment, but it might not be. It's in the proper aspect ratio, which I appreciate because a lot of these older DVDs simply aren't. Open the disc, you got a very dark image of the critters there. And yeah, they're much more creepy than gremlins. I mean, take a look at those little buggers. They are the stuff of nightmares. And again, it's something I love. So I watched that, and then I'd already had a DVD copy of this, but I upgraded when I found a very, very cheap Blu-ray copy of Small Soldiers, directed by Joe Dante. This one had a little bit of problem in production because the studio decided they wanted to make it more kid-friendly. And so they took out a bunch of the battle scenes and a bunch of the explosions because they didn't think kids like explodey stuff, which is not true. They love it. This is also a satire on militarism. It's also a satire on war toys. And it's a satire on corporate greed, though ultimately the corporate greed does prevail in a very weird way. Joe Dante did intend this movie to be the start of a franchise. And in fact, there was an attempt to reboot it in about 2019, I think it was. Let me check my notes. 2014, there was going to be a reboot called Toymageddon, which was about the toys in a toy factory rebelling and using AI to fight against human beings. But that, even though the script was written for that, it never became anything for some reason. Probably some kind of corporate thing in the background. But Small Soldiers, I love. Starts out with a toy company called Heartland Play Systems, which gets taken over by a company called Globotech, whose boss is named Gil Mars, played by Dennis Leary. Mars, of course, being the god of war. Two of the toy developers, played by Jay Moore and David Cross, are developing a line of toys, one of which is the Commando Elite, which are war toys and they're action figures basically. And their enemies are the Gorgonites, which are kind of softer and more peaceful. But when Globotech takes over the company, and Globotech is basically a defense weapon system company, they decide they want to have the toys work, and they're given a deadline to make these toys actually function in some way so that they can sell them into the market and make a lot of money. In order to build these, the character played by Jay Moore accesses Globotech inventory for chips and computer bits and stuff like that, and finds the X-1000 chip, which is basically a military AI chip, which has been discarded by Globotech in the military because it's not electromagnetic pulse proof, and therefore it's not good for military use. He uses these chips for the toys, not knowing that a toy with this chip in it is not only an intelligent AI, but has the ability to learn and evolve. So an enormous PR campaign is started for the Commando Elite and the Gorgonites. They're about to launch 300,000 sets of these toys, and that is where the story starts. A kid called Alan, whose father runs a toy shop which doesn't have war toys or electronic toys of any kind in it, and is therefore about to go bankrupt, cons the truck driver who is delivering the toys, played by Dick Miller, the wonderful, ubiquitous Dick Miller, cons him into giving him one lot of these toys so he can sell them while his father's away in a conference and make a little money for the toy shop. He's trying to help his father. The kid, whose name is Alan, has a bit of a backstory where he acted up in school and other places and got a bad reputation, got thrown out of a couple of schools because he just didn't settle in. Alan's enamored of a young girl called Christy, played by Kirsten Dunst, who ultimately helps him when it comes to fighting the Commando Elite. There's some really good stuff at the start. We actually see, probably for the first time in a science fiction movie, the 3D printing of the toys. They actually use 3D printing technology. And that's kind of impressive for the time. 1998. The toys have a lifetime lithium battery which doesn't run out and is good for decades. We know the lithium batteries aren't, but we'll let that pass because you've got to have one impossible thing in a science fiction movie. So Ellen starts playing with the toys and activates the Commando Elite. And the Commando Elite is led by Chip Hazard, voiced by Tommy Lee Jones.
10 hut.
Major Chip Hazard, reporting for duty, sir.
Who is a dead-set military headache. He's gung-ho, he's semper fi, he's all those kind of things in a military toy form. And his cohort are all voiced by people who were in The Dirty Dozen. You got Jim Brown in there. You get Ernest Borgnine in there. You get Clint Walker. So you got a whole bunch of familiar actors doing the voices for that. The weird thing is the Gorgonites, apart from Archer, their leader, are all voiced by people who were in Spinal Tap. Christopher Guest and Michael McKean and people like that are doing the voices for the Gorgonites. But the leader of the Gorgonites, Archer, is voiced by Frank Langella. And for whatever reason, Frank Langella gives us a really nuanced character in that voice acting.
Halt! Who goes there?
Greetings, I am Archer, emissary of the Gorgonites.
And in fact, there is Archer. My little Archer figure that I picked up at a fan auction at a science fiction convention. Don't have any of the extras for it, like the crossbow or the javelins or anything. But that one always sits on my desk because I really like the design. And it's very, very cool, and I'm happy with that. So I'll just leave him down here. Christie's father is played by Phil Hartman. And this was Phil Hartman's last film role before he was unfortunately killed by his wife. In fact, the end credits of the movie do say "For Phil," acknowledging Phil Hartman. Totally over the top in the movie. It doesn't necessarily steal scenes, but he fills them out in a really great way. So the Gorgonites are also activated, and Archer becomes friends with Alan. And Archer learns a lot about the world, not by looking at the internet, because this is pre-internet, but they did have a copy of Microsoft Encarta on Alan's computer on CD-ROMs. And Archer learns about the world by learning through Encarta, which is kind of very dated, but very cool as well. And the other Gorgonites are almost destroyed by the Commando Elite before Alan realizes that they're all intelligent and that the Commando Elite are planning to not only kill the Gorgonites, but take over and occupy territory. And so, in some ways, it parallels movies like Gremlins. The small soldiers and the Commando Elite go up against the Gorgonites and go up against Alan's family and Christie's family in order to save the world, in a sense. Though there is some implication at the end of the film that things are going to get worse. This movie has a lot of grown-up things for a movie which ultimately the studio decided was going to be a kids' film. There's a scene where the Commando Elite find Christie's collection of Gwendy dolls and decide to make them the cannon fodder for their battles. Scene where they're looking at one of the Gwendy dolls' beds, and one of the Commando Elite gets a little horny, asking if they can have some R&R. And you kind of go, yeah, that doesn't quite sit well with a kids' movie. But that's because it was going to be aimed at an older audience originally. And the fact that these toys having weapons, they make cannons, they make flamethrowers, they turn, they're using nail guns, they're using chainsaws, they're using all sorts of things. It's a very creepy movie in some ways. That gearing it to an adult audience and then needing to cut it back a bit, there are things to slip through which are still geared to a much more mature audience. And so that makes it a little bit uncertain in the way that it approaches this stuff. There are also a lot of classic movie lines and classic movie references that turn up. It's a Joe Dante movie. That's going to be inevitable. This is a man who put together a whole bunch of clips in the 1960s to make a 4-hour film called The Movie Orgy. Joe Dante is never going to make a movie that doesn't have a whole bunch of references in it. And I kind of like the ones that are in this movie. There's also a Spice Girls reference, which again dates the movie, but is kind of cool. There's a really interesting scene where Chip Hazard is giving a morale talk to his troops against the background of an American flag, and it's a very obvious reference to Patton and George C. Scott playing George S. Patton. And the lovely thing about it, looking at it from a modern viewpoint, is Chip Hazard's speech is a word salad of cliches of military movies.
No poor sap ever won a war by dying for his country. He won it by being all that he can be. Damn the torpedoes, or give me death. Eternal vigilance is the price of duty. And to the victors go the spoils.
So, like ChatGPT, Chip Hazard has an ability to just put together word salad that sounds vaguely like something, but actually isn't. And I found that really interesting. It wasn't something that the filmmakers could anticipate, but it is something that's manifested in our modern world. Large language models are basically word salads that sound right but definitely art in a lot of ways. I really liked Small Soldiers. I think it's underrated. It did okay at the box office, but it didn't do fantastically well. Gatekeeping of, is this a kid's movie or is this a movie for older audiences, worked against the movie functioning as well as it should have. Nonetheless, it's great. And this Archer figure is just so cool. And I do enjoy the film. Every couple of years I watch it. It's one of those movies that shows the threat of a science fictional technology or a science fictional theme on an American nuclear family of the 20th century. A theme which goes back a long way. Even the 1953 Invaders from Mars has a lot of that to it. It's been a part of science fiction cinema for a very long time now, and I don't think it's going away anytime soon. So that's what I got for you this time around. 2 science fiction movies where something attacks American families, and it's not a New York real estate developer. Let me know what you think, whether you've seen these films or whether you like them. I think I'm going to watch the Critters sequels at some stage. I've got a lot else to watch at the moment. I've got some reviewed copies coming in that are really, really sweet. And over the next week or two, we're going to be looking at those. But let me know whether you've seen Critters and Small Soldiers and what you think of them. They're worth a rewatch if you haven't watched them for a while too. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, leave a comment. As I said, you can also support the channel by becoming a channel member on YouTube or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. And I am doing a patron giveaway in the next week or two. So if you want to be part of that, you want to get in on it. So until next time, when I'm actually looking at a new lot of horror movies that Umbrella Entertainment have just released, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch Small Soldiers, and I'll catch you next time.